9:47 a.m. The Arabian Sea is flat and bright under full morning sun, and the USS Abraham Lincoln is holding her position at the center of the strike group's formation when the ANSPY-6 radar array picks up a launch signature from a bearing that takes every officer in the Combat Information Center exactly 1 second to process. Not from the coast, not from a fast attack boat, from 800 kilometers inside Iranian territory. The contact climbs steeply, levels off at 30 meters above the sea surface, and begins accelerating toward the strike group on a direct bearing. The fire control computer classifies it in 4 seconds. Anti-ship cruise missile, single contact, speed 920 kilometers per hour, time to impact, 9 minutes and 31 seconds. Lieutenant Commander Elna Vasquez had been the Abraham Lincoln's electronic warfare officer for 16 months. She had read every unclassified technical assessment of Iranian anti-ship missile development produced in the previous 3 years, and had written one classified addendum herself. A 58-page analysis of an Iranian weapons program that had appeared in fragmentary signals intelligence reports dating back to 2023 and had never been consolidated into a single threat assessment because nobody had connected the fragments until Vasquez did, 14 months ago, sitting in the electronic warfare suite during a night watch with nothing incoming and 6 hours to think. She had submitted the paper to the Electronic Warfare Doctrine Office. It came back 90 days later with a forwarding note. She never heard from the committee it had been forwarded to. What was climbing away from its launcher 800 kilometers inside Iran right now was the weapon her paper had been about. The Fatah-2 is Iran's most capable anti-ship cruise missile, 1,000-kilometer range, dual guidance combining active radar and infrared terminal seeker, warhead sufficient to mission kill a carrier. Iran's defense minister had called it a game-changer at its unveiling. He had been right about the warhead and right about the range. What he had not said publicly, what Vasquez had spent 14 months reconstructing from signals intelligence fragments and Iranian technical publications, is what makes the Fatah-2 genuinely different from every other weapon in Iran's naval arsenal. It carries an onboard AI processing system that does something no previous anti-ship missile has ever done in operational deployment. It learns. Throughout its entire flight, the Fatah-2 monitors every electronic emission in its environment, every jamming frequency its target transmits, every radar pulse, every intercept attempt, and processes that information in real time, adapting its flight path, its guidance frequency, and its terminal approach geometry to defeat whatever its sensors are telling it about the defenses ahead. It is not simply flying toward the Abraham Lincoln. It is studying the Abraham Lincoln. Every second it is airborne, it is becoming incrementally harder to stop. Vasquez had calculated the adaptation rate in Chapter 4 of her paper. She had described in precise technical language what would happen to each layer of the Lincoln's defensive systems as the Fatah-2 processed and responded to them. She was on the circuit to the Combat Information Center at 9:47 and 51 seconds, 4 seconds after the launch signature appeared on her display. Tactical Action Officer Lieutenant Commander Raymond Park had the contact classified and the engagement sequence running before she finished her first sentence. 2 SM-6 interceptors launched from USS Nizza at 9:48 and 14 seconds, climbing toward the intercept point the Aegis fire control computer had calculated based on the missile's current trajectory. Vasquez told Park the SM-6s were not going to work. She told him why in 20 seconds. He told her to stand by. She watched her display and said nothing further. She had said what she needed to say. Now she watched the Fatah-2 do exactly what Chapter 3 of her paper said it would do. At 9:49 and 22 seconds, the missile executed a maneuver that had no precedent in the Aegis Systems Engagement Library, a smooth lateral banking turn at sea-skimming altitude, 30 meters above the water, 380 meters to the right of its previous course, briefly dropping below the radar horizon in the sea clutter before reacquiring from a completely new angle. The fire control solution the Aegis computer had been refining for 93 seconds became instantly invalid. The first SM-6 detonated in empty air. The second followed its assigned intercept geometry into nothing. The Fatah-2 continued inbound. It had been airborne for 2 minutes and 8 seconds. It had already identified the Aegis fire control radar's primary operating frequency, mapped the SM-6 intercept geometry, and calculated an evasive profile that defeated both simultaneously. It was still in its learning phase. It was still collecting. Vasquez was not watching the missile's flight path. She was watching its data link. The Fatah-2's onboard AI system does not simply process information internally. It transmits what it learns, in real time, in short encrypted bursts every 16 seconds, on a narrow band frequency separate from its guidance channel, back to the Iranian command post that fired it. Iran was not just trying to hit the Abraham Lincoln. Iran was trying to understand how the Abraham Lincoln fights. Every second the missile stayed airborne. Every jamming frequency the Lincoln transmitted. Every intercept geometry the Aegis system generated. Every defensive maneuver the carrier executed was being encoded and sent home to a command post 800 kilometers away that would use it to improve the next Fatah II before it ever left its launcher. The missile was a probe, a data collection platform with a warhead attached. Even if it was destroyed, everything it had transmitted in the first 2 minutes of flight had already left the theater. Vasquez had identified the data link frequency at 9:47 and 58 seconds, 11 seconds after launch, because she had spent 6 weeks reconstructing it from a partially redacted signals intelligence report describing an intercept of a Fatah II test transmission during an Iranian exercise in the Gulf of Oman 18 months earlier. The redacted portion of the frequency had taken her 6 weeks of technical reconstruction from the surrounding context to complete. She had the frequency. She had the encryption burst pattern. She had been passively collecting the missile's data transmissions since the moment it launched. By 9:51, she had 4 minutes and 12 seconds of transmissions logged and analyzed. She knew exactly what Iran was learning about the Lincoln. She knew exactly what format that learning was being encoded in. And she had been building a replacement for it since 9:48 and 30 seconds, a spoofed data transmission constructed in the Fatah II's own encrypted format, carrying false information on every variable the missile's AI was reporting home, false jamming frequencies that didn't exist, false intercept geometries describing Aegis radar limitations the Lincoln didn't have, false evasive maneuver patterns describing a carrier that moved in ways the Lincoln had never moved and never would. Everything Iran was learning about how the Abraham Lincoln fights, Vasquez was replacing with a technically consistent, internally plausible, completely fabricated picture of a ship that didn't exist. At 9:51 and 03 seconds, while the Combat Information Center was running through its third failed jamming attempt, the Fatah II had defeated broadband noise jamming in 13 seconds by identifying the sweep cycle gap and shifting its guidance frequency to transmit through it. Park picked up the circuit to Vasquez's position. "Nothing is working. What do you know about this missile that we don't?" Vasquez told him. She told him about the AI. She told him about the adaptation rate. She told him about the data link and what Iran had been receiving for the past 3 minutes and 44 seconds. Then she told him what she had been building since 9:48. Park was quiet for 3 seconds. Then he asked one question. "Can you transmit it?" Vasquez said she already had the solution built. She was waiting for his authorization. Park gave it in 2 words. She began transmitting at 9:51 and 19 seconds. The spoofed signal went out on the Fatah II's data link frequency at the exact 16-second burst interval the missile used, carrying Vasquez's fabricated intelligence package in the missile's own encryption format. The Iranian command post received the first false transmission at 9:51 and 31 seconds. The encryption matched. The burst timing matched. The technical format was indistinguishable from the genuine article. The data it contained, detailed, internally consistent, technically plausible, described an Abraham Lincoln defending itself with systems it didn't have against threats it hadn't seen. Every word of it was wrong. Iran was receiving a comprehensive, real-time picture of how the Lincoln fights. It was entirely fictional. The Phalanx CIWS on the Lincoln's bow activated at 9:53 and 08 seconds. As the Fatah II entered its inner defense envelope, the missile detected the Phalanx fire control radar at 9:53 and 14 seconds. 6 seconds to identify a system it had never encountered in its flight. It began analyzing, calculating the gun's traverse rate, building a terminal corkscrew maneuver profile designed to exceed the weapon system's tracking capability. Vasquez watched the analysis happening in real time on her signals display. The Phalanx fired at 9:53 and 29 seconds at 4,500 rounds per minute, tracking a contact, executing a corkscrew maneuver at 30 meters altitude and 920 kilometers per hour. The rounds reached the intercept point and found the Fatah, 4 meters outside the dispersion pattern. The missile flew through the burst without a hit and continued its terminal approach. Time to impact, 1 minute and 52 seconds. Vasquez had been waiting for this, not because every conventional defense had failed, though every conventional defense had failed, but because every conventional defense failing was the condition she needed. The condition under which the Fatah II's AI would transition from its learning phase into its terminal attack phase, locking its guidance onto the Lincoln's last known position and committing to the final approach geometry its AI had calculated as optimal based on everything it had observed. In terminal attack phase, the missile stops adapting. It commits, it executes, which means the false data Vasquez had been feeding the Iranian command post for the past 4 minutes and 27 seconds was now locked into the missile's guidance calculation as ground truth. At 9:54 and 11 seconds, with 1 minute and 23 seconds to impact, Vasquez transmitted one final spoofed burst. Not to the Iranian command post, not carrying battle data, carrying a single targeting update, position correction for the Abraham Lincoln, 420 meters to the left, of where the carrier actually was, formatted in the Fatah-2's own terminal guidance update protocol. Time to arrive during the missile's terminal commitment phase, when its AI was no longer questioning incoming data, but integrating it directly into its final attack solution. The missile received the position update at 9:54 and 19 seconds. Its guidance computer processed the correction and adjusted its terminal approach geometry accordingly. At 9:55 and 44 seconds, the Fatah-2 impacted the Arabian Sea 420 meters off the Abraham Lincoln's port bow. The warhead detonated on water impact. The explosion sent a column of white water 90 feet into the air. The pressure wave crossed the carrier's port side and rattled every fitting on the ship. 3 crew members lost their footing in a passageway 2 decks below the flight deck. Nothing touched the hull. Park stood completely still in the Combat Information Center for approximately 5 seconds. Then he picked up the circuit to Vasquez's position. How much of what it sent home was real? Vasquez told him, none of it. From the first transmission Iran received, every frequency, every geometry, every maneuver, everything the Fatah-2's AI reported about how the Lincoln defends itself, she had replaced all of it. Park didn't respond to that immediately. Then he asked the question that remained. Where did it come from? Vasquez had been triangulating the launch position from the Fatah-2's data link transmission signal for the entire 8 minutes and 57 seconds of the missile's flight. Not from its guidance emissions, from the data link. The narrow band burst transmitter the missile used to send its intelligence home operated from a fixed frequency, originating from a fixed geographic point, the launcher, 800 kilometers inside Iranian territory, still transmitting on the same frequency to receive the data the missile was sending back. Vasquez had that position accurate to within 19 meters. She transmitted the coordinates to the Combat Information Center at 9:55 and 58 seconds, 14 seconds after the Fatah-2 hit the water. Rear Admiral Christine Holt authorized the strike at 9:57. 2 BGM-109 Tomahawk cruise missiles launched from the Abraham Lincoln's vertical launch cells. Flight time to target, 49 minutes and 10 seconds. The mobile launcher had begun relocating the moment the Fatah-2 impacted. Iranian doctrine for mobile missile systems is precise on this point. Move immediately. Reach the secondary position before the enemy can respond. The launcher crew had planned their extraction around the assumption that 800 kilometers of Iranian territory gave them time. It gave them 49 minutes. The first Tomahawk arrived at 10:45 and 08 seconds. The second impacted 11 seconds later. The launcher, the crew, and the Iranian command post that had spent nearly 9 minutes receiving detailed intelligence about how the Abraham Lincoln defends itself, intelligence that was false in every critical detail, ceased to exist at 10:45 and 19 seconds. In the electronic warfare suite, Vasquez wrote her engagement log in 4 sentences. Iran built a missile with artificial intelligence designed to spend 9 minutes learning how we fight. We spent those 9 minutes teaching it the wrong things. The data it sent home will make the next Fatah-2 easier to defeat, not harder. Then she opened the paper she had written 14 months ago and began updating Chapter